Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. If it's your first time tuning in, my name is Salvador or Sal. And on this show, I basically go into in-depth how to raise money on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, equity crowdfunding, e-commerce. How do you grow your sales, your revenue, do the marketing? How do you even come up with a product idea? We cover a ton of stuff on this show, honestly. And I think it's just because, I get so curious and interested about many of these really interesting, successful entrepreneurs and how they were able to, against all odds, come out with a product and do it and to blow it up, right? So today's episode, we have a multiple successful Kickstarter campaigner on the show. The one that we were talking about specifically in this interview was for Dangerous Destinations hardcover or PDF for any fantasy RPG. This essentially under the tabletop games category raised $158,000, a bit more than that, and more than 3,600 backers on Kickstarter. A lot of backers. So if you're doing a game, a tabletop, you might really like today's podcast episode. This is from Nord Games, right? And they had actually created 21 Kickstarter campaigns. So this is a seasoned veteran, right? Seasoned veterans that you'll be learning from today. Some of the great insights that they have for you when it comes to how Kickstarter has changed over the years. Why is it that they've been able to dial this down essentially into a formula, a format for launching a successful Kickstarter campaign, where their funding is coming from, advice that they have for you on the stretch goals and reward tiers, and their approach to coming up with new product ideas, right? What's working for them to really keep their fingers on the pulse with this particular industry. The other thing I think is kind of a bonus is if you're trying to build a business out of a more interesting kind of field like tabletops or gaming, I think they have a lot of good insights on that as well in today's podcast episode, and I think you will like that. So one of my goals when I started this show back in 2015, I think it was, I was super shy. My first episodes are horrible, man. If you go back and listen, I don't even know if you can on Spotify or on podcast app on iTunes, right? Or my YouTube channel, youtube.com/crowdcrux. They were horrible. I'll also put bite-sized podcasts as well on my Instagram. If you search me on Salvador Briggman on Instagram, you'll come up and you get bite-sized versions of the episodes. So anyway, it was atrocious, but the reason why I kept doing it was I was just so interested. I was so curious. And I really want to find out, you see a public facing campaign, someone who has 3,660 backers, customers. How is it they were able to do that, and what was happening behind the scenes? Because I'll tell you, I've met a lot of, just honestly because I'm lucky and I've been doing this for a while, for 8 years or so, I've met a lot of very successful people, and I've met a lot of influencers, people who I've only read about or seen YouTube videos about, and I get to meet them, and it's so cool, and when I meet them, what I realize is they're just normal people. They're just normal human beings who had an idea and took action and built a team, and they executed on it. So what I like revealing with this show, I think, is if you've never touched success, if you've never tasted success in a larger way with this particular new maybe tabletop gaming genre or a new product that you're coming up with, I think it is so beneficial to have role models and to have people you can aspire to. And what's more, to have guidance and to have mentors and teachers who can share with you step by step how to actually execute a successful Kickstarter campaign. So that's exactly why I wanted to have on these guys, because they had 26 successful campaigns. Obviously, they know a thing or two about launching successful products. So I think you're gonna like today's episode. At the end of the show, I'm gonna mention a way you can work with me if you want to, if you like my pizzazz and passion that I bring to my work, and also some of the ways I like to dial in specifically and really get to the nitty gritty and the specifics of launching a campaign. You can listen for that at the end of today's podcast episode. Thank you for listening. It's coming up right after this. This podcast episode is sponsored by the Gadget Flow. The Gadget Flow reaches over 28 million people, and they've been around since 2012. They are Indiegogo and Kickstarter experts. They featured over 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns, and if you have a technology or design campaign, it is a great platform to generate awareness and get backers. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a six-figure Kickstarter campaigner on the show. This is for Dangerous Destinations hardcover or PDF for any fantasy RPG, the definitive guide for creating intriguing and dynamic destinations for storytelling and fantasy role-playing games. This project has just really exploded. More than 3,000 backers, insane. And we have a member of the team here on the show to kind of reveal what's happening a bit behind the scenes. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Do you think we can get started? Maybe you could tell the listeners a bit about the project and sort of your role in the campaign.
Well, the project is really a follow-up to our previous book in this series called Spectacular Settlements. That book was all about creating settlements that your heroes of your story or your role-playing game would go and maybe get quests or have some intrigue, downtime activities, take a rest, that kind of thing. And that ranged from things as small as a trading post up through things like a capital city, basically, and everywhere in between, some towns and villages. And we even put in rules for things like fortresses and ways of building those out to make them interesting. And then we have done the same thing, applied the same theory and builder techniques to the dangerous destinations that you might have your adventures in. So you might get your quest in the settlement, but you might actually go on the quest in the dangerous destination. So it's really with these two books, you're going to be able to really get into some pretty heavy duty world building, and also elements of plot and story are brought in because elements of the destination are established that sort of give clues into what this place is all about, who lives there, what's going on, and what do you see on your approach. When you arrive, what is actually happening in the here and now. And I think that that's a really powerful tool for anybody who is trying to really engage their reader, or in the case of RPGs, their players.
Very cool. And your role in the project would be?
My role, I'm the owner of the company. I come up with most of the ideas and think, hey, this would be cool. I wonder if we should make it. And then the rest of the team and I sit down and determine if we are going to make this thing, how will we accomplish that goal? How are we going to actually make it from more than just an idea? And how are we going to make it something that other people are going to want to purchase and use?
So I saw that you started on Kickstarter around 2013. Is that when the company also got started?
The company was established in 2011. And then we dabbled a little bit and goofed off quite a bit. It was really a very hobby-oriented exploration. It wasn't really a job. And then in 2016, we really started taking it seriously and saying, hey, you know what? We've been successful with a few little things. Let's see about doing something bigger. And that was the ultimate NPC's skullduggery book in 2016 that we started to make a name for ourselves at that point in time. And I've also been involved with Kickstarter projects for other publishers. And I think that I've got 30 or 35 under my belt at this point where I've either been part of it or run it directly. I mean, obviously, anything for Nord Games, I've been the one running it directly. But with some of the other publishers out there who I've helped run a campaign, you learn things from every single one of them. Hopefully, you take away some wisdom and you can apply that to future projects that you may help out with or be responsible for 100%.
That's super impressive, man. Like all these campaigns under your belt, I'm sure you have a wealth of wisdom when it comes to doing these. And even just getting to see all these different products come to light, I think is probably very rewarding as well, right? And you have a really fun category. So I can see why you'd goof off, right? When you're just getting started with the business there.
Well, being in the gaming industry, what's the old adage, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And
yeah.
Accurate. Now and then we do have to do the stuff that might not be that much fun. But then at the end of the day, we are making games, being able to play games and use our creations in our games, or actually watch other people use our creations in their games. And that's the part I think that I like the most, is when I get feedback from people saying, hey, I really enjoyed this product that you put out because I had this situation and this is what I did with your product in that situation. That always makes me feel really good that they were able to use the product in a way that made their experience better. And at the end of the day, that's what my main focus is: improve people's gaming experiences, whether they're a player or a game master, or in the case of these books, Settlements and Destinations, even if they're just a writer, they're not creating adventures for role-playing games. They're actually just trying to create stories, because I love reading creative writing, and especially fantasy-themed. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are my favorite books out there. And so I am especially attached to that genre, and I'm always just very happy when people are able to use what I've created and my team has created to create something on their own that is better for my product having been used in the creation process.
So cool. How do you actually come up with your ideas? Because there's obviously a lot of territory in the fantasy, the gaming kind of niche, and a lot of people doing other things. How do you come up with your ideas for a new project?
Most of the time it starts with a, hey, this would be cool to have at my table concept. And then it just goes from there. But there are a lot of things that we have shelved because, yeah, they'd be cool, but are they something that other people may want? And you have to think of it when you're running a business, you have to think of it from a perspective of, yeah, that might be something that people might buy, but will the masses be interested in that product? And if the answer is no, then it's probably not something that you want to pursue as a company, but you may as well create something like that with a print-on-demand service or something like that, where if it's not that expensive to make it for yourself and a few friends and stuff, but don't really pursue it on the large scale. But if it is something that you feel does have legs and you do feel would have mass appeal, then why wouldn't you put it out there? And with a platform like Kickstarter or any of the other crowdfunding resources out there, there is a pretty minimal risk compared to in times past where you would be into it for your research and development, as well as your production cost and everything else that comes along with that, which is a pretty big investment for most of us. And I'm not an especially wealthy person, so leaning on Kickstarter to get things off the ground when we first started was especially handy for us. And now it just makes sense to, even as a company as large as North Games, it just makes sense to put it out there to the community and say, hey, are you guys interested in this? And it really helps us develop a lot more products in a shorter amount of time than we would be able to if we went with the traditional publishing methods.
Company, yeah. Have you had any difficult learning lessons since being on Kickstarter? Obviously, it's changed a lot since 2013, but have you had any difficult learning lessons?
A lot more than I could cover in this. In fact, I'm planning on doing a webinar soon with Jason from BackerKit. BackerKit has solved a lot of problems for us over the years. And I would say that the biggest issue you will run into is the fulfillment process. If you are a creator and you're listening to this, the logistics around physically shipping goods is difficult. And there are a lot of very, very small things that can make things very complicated very, very quickly. So it's all the little registering for this kind of license and being able to have this kind of equipment and all these little things that really add up to a very complicated process. But again, we're going to be having a webinar about that very topic, and hopefully people will be able to take away some tidbits of wisdom from that.
Do you have any difficult learning lessons when it comes to getting the project funded?
So you have to start from a little bit of psychology. What are the people looking at your project going to like about it, and why are they going to back it? So you have to get into their heads a little bit. And you also have to think about what is the right price point for my product, and how do I present a good value proposition for this product. And if you've done everything right, you should be able to convert people pretty quickly. People are going to come to the project, either like it or not like it, and buy it or not buy it. You will have some people who will click on the remind me button and they'll come back at the last 48 hours. They'll back it when it's just about to end. And that's just the reality. Those are the kind of people who will need a little bit of urgency in order to actually convert. But a lot of people will look at it one time and go, I like it, boom, and I'm going to buy it. So that's really where I find is the hardest part, or requires the most time to develop the right value proposition and make sure that when people come to the project, they are given all the information they need to make that decision, whether it's going to be a good product for them. You don't want everybody in the world to buy this product because it's not going to be for everybody. But you do want those people who it is targeted toward to see the value in it, run up the bat, and be able to make that decision, whether they have the necessary money to be able to buy it right then and there, or if it's something they're going to keep an eye on.
How do you deliver that value?
Deliver that? I think that really in our world, gaming, artwork is going to be huge. Having good quality materials is going to be good. And then saying materials as far as like what the binding of the book or the packaging of the box or whatever you're producing. But then you're also going to have good quality content. So the actual content of the book? What is this beyond the artwork? Because if it's just a book of artwork, hey, cool, that's cool. But if it has good content, good tools for, in this case, creating destinations where your stories take place, where the quests happen, where the antagonists of the story are going to have the showdown with the heroes. That's really important to have good quality content.
The story, yeah.
Yeah, and so if your product has good artwork, has good materials, and good content, then you've hit all the right check marks. Now, on top of that, the marketing has to also hit the right check marks. And that is, like I said earlier, the value proposition, but also making sure the customer knows what they're getting into and being very, very clear that this is what this thing does. Kickstarter does a pretty good job of giving you enough character limit to describe what the project is. And in your introduction, you said Dangerous Destinations, hardcover, PDF, Brain Fantasy RPG, the definitive guide to creating intriguing and dynamic destinations for storytelling and fantasy role-playing games. That summarizes it pretty well. It tells you what that thing is. And now you can go more into the description to find out more and more about the project. And a good video is also super important. And we think we do a pretty good job of summarizing in about 2 minutes or less what to expect out of this project. And we also have one of our people on staff, Ralph Stickley, who is British, do the voiceover, which really helps in the fantasy themed stuff that we usually put out. So his voiceovers are also compelling on their own.
In terms of creating the content here, so one of the things you mentioned was story, right? Another thing I see here is almost like a gamification of the page with all of these different funding amounts that people can get to and the stretch goals, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the presentation is key, and making it easy for people to decide which level they want to get into. And as far as gamification, yeah, good graphics and nice big buttons and stuff like that. Easy way to manage your pledge after you've backed it. In our case, when it comes to stretch goals, we hit all the stretch goals on day one. So unfortunately, there's not really much more we can do to interact with the community to get those stretch goals accomplished. What we can do is, now that we've way overfunded, what we've said is from here on out, we're just going to make discretionary decisions about what to add to this book. And in this case, most of it is going toward more artwork or inspiration. Getting people more artwork in the book always helps to just inspire them and make them think, oh, that's a pretty cool scene. I wonder what I could do with that in my own world. And so we've got over 40 new pieces of full color artwork being added to the book, and there may be more on the way.
Very cool. Very cool. When I was looking through your community section, it looks like a really big swath of people are coming and returning to Kickstarter to back this. Would you say that this community you've built on the Kickstarter platform is almost the asset in and of itself of what's kind of leading to a lot of this initial funding rush, right, for the campaign?
For sure, a lot of the initial funding, and I'm an analytics guy and a marketing guy, I can go into the data and tell you consistently, we get most of our early backers from our existing email lists who are part of our newsletter, have backed our previous projects, want to know about new projects coming up. And so we find that most of the early pledges in the first 48 hours to 7 days are going to be existing backers. And then we start to see the new backers trickle in more and more. And it's almost in the reverse at the very end. We almost usually see more new backers in the final hours of the campaign than on launch. And so that existing community is huge. And every Kickstarter that you do, you will build that community bigger, 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 as long as you keep up the quality of your product. And also keep in mind, you deliver in a timely manner and you don't end up with any issues. Like, let's say that you don't remember about things like VAT, value added tax, and you ship all your stuff out, and then all of your backers have to pay an extra $20 to actually receive their product. So they paid $40 for the book, they paid an extra $5 for the shipping, and then they have to pay an extra $20 for the VAT. Not great. So it's stuff like that where keep those things in mind. Keep your quality up and keep your quality of customer service up. And part of customer service is making sure that there's no hidden fees and that kind of thing that the customer is going to incur and then be upset about and probably not back one of your future projects.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillment, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately.
Looking at some of your community, obviously a bunch of it's already on Kickstarter, but you also have a Discord group, YouTube, Twitch, right? Facebook. Which of these have you found to be the best kind of channel to get people from those communities to the site? I've heard a lot of good things about Discord and that community function there. Do you have any thoughts on what's the best channel for you?
So I know that our Discord people are definitely very active. So that's, if you can build that as big as possible to have that very direct engagement, because it's almost like instant messaging on a group level. Because anybody in the Discord channel, let's say you've got a channel set up for a new project, anybody who's part of your Discord can jump in there and ask questions. You can immediately respond to them. If you've got your alerts turned on, you'll be notified and all that. So Discord is very, very helpful for that direct messaging almost. And then Facebook and Instagram and Twitter are excellent for getting things to be a bit more viral. So if you put out something to people that like your company page, for example, and I'll give a direct example, we put out a bunch of stuff pre-campaign to say, hey, join us for the live stream. We're going to be creating Dangerous Destinations. It launches on the 12th. And just constantly put that messaging out there. They'll like it. They'll share it. And that gets exposure to more people. And so our page likes go up. The amount of people following the project goes up. And over time, you just build a bigger and bigger community. It's not as direct as Discord because people are going to, let's say, message you and make comments, that kind of thing. And you're going to get back to them as fast as you can. But it's not going to be so much like we're all in I think of Discord as almost like we're being in one big room.
Yeah.
And almost like a convention sort of thing. And we can all see each other and talk to each other and direct message each other pretty easily. Whereas with Facebook, you can still do that kind of thing, and social media in general, you still do that kind of thing. But I think that there's less of immediacy to it. It's almost like I check my Facebook messages and stuff at some point in the day, not all the time. I don't have Facebook up all the time.
It's not real time, as much.
Yeah. And it can be if you want to check it out. But most of the time I find that I use it to be sort of a check once a day, and Discord is just on constantly.
One of the most common, I think, difficulties with a lot of these projects is this, what I call the Kickstarter slump of death, right? Which is in the middle of the campaign when you're kind of losing momentum. Is this something you've commonly experienced with your projects? And if so, how do you deal with this?
Every single project I've ever seen does this, and we call it the doldrums. So, and this is applicable on every project. I don't care if it's the most wildly successful project of ever. You're going to see that in the middle bit, you're going to have a slump. You're going to have a slowdown. The momentum starts to change at about the 3 or 4 day mark after launch. So the thing you have to keep in mind is it's not necessarily the slump of death. It's not going to kill your campaign. But what you do want to do, if you are planning on launching a campaign, is try to figure out how you can fund as quickly as possible. That may be in the first day, first 48 hours. In our case, it was the first 15 minutes. But that also is our 20-something project. There's a lot of projects under our belt. We have a lot of people following it before it even launches. So figure out a reasonable goal to set so that you can fund as quickly as possible, so that when people do come and see your project after it's funded, they go, oh, this thing's going to happen and I'm going to back it. I don't know about any research that's done on the psychology of that, but my gut tells me that a project that is not funded yet, that has been going for, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks, is going to have a harder time because of that psychological impairment, where people are going to go, well, it hasn't funded and it might not fund. I don't know if I'm going to bother backing this project, which is sort of defeats the purpose of a Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is around the concept of an idea. We have an idea, we want to fund this thing, and you contributing to it will help it reach that funding goal. But I think that there's still a psychological thing when people look at a project that hasn't funded yet, and let's say it's a few weeks into it, and it is a harder decision for them to choose to back it.
Yeah. So basically get funded as soon as you can, basically.
That's been successful for us, for sure.
Okay. And then in terms of other techniques, obviously Kickstarter has changed a lot over the years. I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, things like Facebook ads and social media advertising has become a lot more popular. Are there things that you would recommend people experiment with during this middle phase with loss of momentum? Should they be focused on PR? Should they be focused on social media ads? What do you think they should think about?
All of the above, actually. So if you've done your homework early on, you should have preloaded yourself with some social media ad campaigns via Facebook ads. You can also do like Google ads, and that'll display across the whole Google network, whole ads network. So you can do text ads, image ads, video ads, all that stuff. And some people say, well, what about my budget? I don't have that much money to be able to devote to that. Well, devote as much as you can, really. And if that is zero, then you have to rely solely on word of mouth. You have to post updates on your Kickstarter asking people to continue to share the project. And understand that not every project is going to be a wild, smash 1,000% funded thing every single time. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially your first project, there are some exceptions where someone has launched their very first project and done crazy numbers, way, way higher than anyone ever expected. Great, good on them. But you can't expect that. So as a new creator, especially, make sure that you have reasonable expectations set. We've gone from running $10,000 campaigns to our record so far was $215,000 on a single project. So understand that it is something that you may build up to over time. And your first couple campaigns may not be wildly successful. If you are in it for the long run, you will eventually get there as long as you continue to reinvest in your company and make sure that you're always putting out the best quality product you can.
Be in it for the long run. Well said. So I know I'm peppering you with a lot of questions here, but just because you've obviously done a lot of projects, I'm really curious. One of the things I noticed on your campaign here is with pricing. So there's this whole schools of thought based on different categories on Kickstarter, like early bird pricing versus limited quantity versus time-related rewards. It looks like you don't really incorporate that into your rewards, aside from like one maybe. Are there any thoughts that you have on that? Is it overused, do you think? What do you think about it?
There's another category you didn't mention, that's Kickstarter exclusive. So let me start with that. We do not do Kickstarter exclusives usually if it's like a product, because then we aren't able to sell that product after the fact. So if it might be a timed exclusive or something like that, I'd be more agreeable to something like that. We did on this project, Dangerous Destinations, we did do an early bird. And really the only difference between the early birds and the non-early birds was for the first 48 hours, the pledges had free shipping if they were a physical pledge. And if it was a digital pledge, it had a small discount, like $5, I think. So the $20 PDF, I think, was $15. So I felt that was reasonable. There's a couple of reasons why we didn't go like crazy discounts and stuff. And we already know that the book is going to be $50 MSRP, and we're putting our price point at $40 for the Kickstarter. So we already know that we're discounting it for our Kickstarter backers. And that's a, hey, thank you for backing our project and continuing to be a supporter of Nord Games. But it was also not to make it so exclusive to where if you didn't learn about us in the first 48 hours or you didn't learn about us beforehand and save the project to be notified on launch, it didn't really totally blow your pledge out of proportion as far as like what you could have got. And therefore people will say, well, I don't want to back this project because they gave the early people so much better of a deal. It was like, hey, we gave them free shipping. That's great. And in some cases, you're going to save more than in other cases. Like here in the US, we have media mail, so it's not going to be as expensive as it will be in Europe, let's say. So the Europeans actually are going to get a few more dollars, if you want to look at it that way, off than the US people on the early birds. But it's not a crazy amount. And so it's not like if you're coming into it late, you're not like, well, I'm not going to back it because all those early birds got it for such a better deal. And why didn't I know about it? And et cetera, et cetera. So my way of thinking is reward those people who are backing it early on, who are sharing it all in place, and really get the momentum going and get us funded. And now we're getting awards like Project We Love by Kickstarter. We're number 1 and 2 on the different pages and stuff. And so we saw a lot of early pledges coming in organically, well, from Kickstarter because of our trending and our placement shortly after it launched. And that was very much due to those early pledgers who got us funded in 15 minutes and all of our stretch goals accomplished in the first day.
Well said. Well said. Just as a follow-up question to the reward pricing here, when you're thinking about the logistical component, you said you're an analytics guy. When you're thinking about the behind the scenes, like spreadsheet pricing for the product, and you have that conversation with the team, how are you thinking about it? Are you thinking you're going to kind of break even on the Kickstarters? Is it also a profit center for you guys? Like, what is your approach to that?
So it depends on the project, but if you're going into the very nitty gritty of production, you want to have a 6-to-1 ratio. So if it costs $1 to produce that item, you should sell it for $6 at a very minimum. So the MSRP, best suggested retail price, should be $6. So additionally, you should do market research during the R&D process to figure out what are comparable products selling for in your local game stores. So that way you have what we call margin. And that margin is going to be bigger or smaller depending on who you're selling it to. So if you are selling that $6 item to the end user, let's say on your website, let's say you're making $5 on each one of those transactions. That's pretty good. You're going to put some of that money away for a future production run. You're going to put some of that money into advertising. You're going to put some of that money into your
operating expenses. Yeah.
So every sale, you can sort of figure out a certain percentage of that sale should go to this, that, or the other thing on how you operate your business. And that's different case by case. Every business is different. But yeah, if you want to get really into the nitty and gritty, 6-to-1 is the minimum. And depending on how many units you're producing, you can get a much, much better than 6-to-1 ratio, but you're talking tens of thousands of units at a certain point. Now, your other question was profitability.
Yeah.
Is Kickstarter a profit center? Yes, it can be. But again, case by case. If you end up spending the entire amount that was raised on Kickstarter to, let's say, pay yourself back for the R&D, pay for the production, and then pay for the fulfillment, and it's all said and done, then no profit, right? But maybe you're left over with 1,000 units of whatever that product is. So let's say 1,000 units times the $6 per unit that you could sell them for, and you've got potentially $6,000 left over. But now it's on you to actually sell those. So yes, you can walk away from Kickstarter with profit, and in some cases you walk away with inventory. But in some cases you walk away with both. Some people, they will do a Kickstarter where they only fulfill whatever was part of that project. They produce as many as they need to fulfill, and that's it. That's totally fine. If that is your business model, totally fine. Other people produce, they spend the entire amount to produce as much as they can that they will then sell. Other times, you will produce a certain amount and you'll bankroll the rest. And the rest will be used for, in our case, this is what we do. We put the rest into the bank for future development of future projects. So that'll go toward creating artwork on the next book, the next game, whatever we're going to work on in the future. And then sometimes people, whatever profits left over, they put in their bank account, they go have a vacation. You earned it. As long as you fulfill the rewards to your backers,
you're good. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of this idea of having like a loss leader in a company, which is a bit more common around like e-commerce and stuff. But if you have now this database of people who have supported you, they like the product that you delivered, you then don't have to work as hard with the marketing next time, right? So then your marketing expenses go down with the next project.
Because you already have a built-in client base, yes.
Yeah. So it's like the more campaigns that you do, also the more profitable it can become from the expenses side on the marketing, right? Because you develop more of an organic user base, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So I love that. So I could be asking you questions all day, but I kind of want to just give you a second here. Maybe you can tell people where they can go and check out your project, and then we can just end with one question here.
Sure. So you go to Kickstarter between now and February 11th at noon Pacific Standard Time. You'll be able to look up dangerous destinations, and you're going to be presented with a lot of different options. You can get in at the PDF level, you can get at the hardcover level. There's a combination. We also have on offer VIP tickets where we're going to be actually running games virtually for the time being, but we're going to be running games where we incorporate the use of this book as well as the previous book, Spectacular Settlements. And we're going to be creating one-shot adventures that we run with the fans. So lots of different options there. But just go to Kickstarter and look up Dangerous Destinations. And you have until February 11th. You've been warned.
Awesome. So my final question for you is, you've been able to accomplish something, my friend, that I think a lot of people envy and I think is quite difficult, which is you've been able to actually make a gaming publishing and designing company, right? And being able to work on some of your ideas and pull together a team to work on this. And I think that's a huge feat. So congratulations on that. For someone who's just getting started, maybe you could leave them with either a word of encouragement, a positive message, or something that you wish you knew when you were back in, I think it was 2010, 2011, 2013. Great if we can end on that.
My mentor in this industry told me something the very first time that I ever met him in real life, and that was rising tides raise all ships. And that is the way that I conduct myself when it comes to other publishers who are where I was several years ago, 10 years ago almost. And so I'm always very happy to give up some of my time and wisdom to anybody who is curious, is at any stage of the process. I even talk to people who have already funded it, that their project is done, they're talking manufacturing, and now they're trying to figure out the fulfillment side of things. At Nord Games, we've been able to tackle every aspect of the process, from the design and development, market research, R&D, pre-campaign, launch day, mid-campaign, ending, post-campaign, fulfillment. And then what do you do after that? How do you sell your product? How do you get into distribution? How do you get into international trade? So all those different elements we've been able to take on and slowly master. So I'm more than happy to offer my wisdom and coaching to anybody who is serious about getting into the gaming industry and wants to use Kickstarter to get things rolling. So I extend that offer to anybody. Go to nordgamesllc.com, fill out our contact form, and let us know. I'm more than happy to schedule some time to get together with you.
Great. Thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And good luck with your remaining days.
Thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and I've been doing this podcast for a while. One of the reasons why I love to come to work every single day is just you never know who you're going to talk to, and you never know the cool stories that are going to emerge, and the advice and the tips and the techniques and the cool stuff that's going to come out of that. You know, I always feel like, you know, when I was first getting started, that like I had discovered this war chest with all of these valuable strategies and techniques which people can use to launch products and raise money. And like I had this war chest, right? And I thought it was so cool. Like, and I started to try to just, rather than like hoarding it for myself, I try to introduce it to people and be like, look at this is so cool, you know, and come up with my book and my YouTube video, my podcast and my blog. And I just was like sharing and disseminating the information because I think everyone deserves to have access to good quality education and information. And over the years as the years have gone by, I've just added to it, man. I've had to upgrade that war chest, and now it's like a treasure room, basically. It's like a treasure trove, if you will, of all of these things that I've learned that work and don't work, and experience that I've had. So it's super rewarding, and it's so cool that even now, like I'm always learning. I'm always learning about new marketing techniques. I'm always learning about what's working, what's not, because that's how you got to be. You got to be always up on your craft. A really great person who's up on their snuff, let's just say maybe like a cook. I've watched this one Netflix documentary, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you like sushi, you might like this Netflix documentary I saw. But basically this guy, in Japan, people will train 10 years to become a sushi chef. 10 years. Think about that, just to make sushi. The level of detail and level of focus that goes into that craft. And even after 10 years, while they become a chef, they're not necessarily the head chef, right? They still got to train and train and train. And this approach to me of always trying to become better at your craft is something that is a lifelong pursuit. It's something that never stops because you just learn things from different paradigms, right? And you learn different practices and the context of how it changes from this product to that product to this environment to that environment to this type of personality of entrepreneur versus this one, right? The things that people choose to focus on. Is it the design? Is it the marketing? Is it the engineering side? Is it the story, right? So there's so much to learn. And this is a lifelong commitment for me where I want to be doing this when I'm super old and I still want to be learning about marketing. I still want to be learning about ways to bring new cool stuff into the world. So thank you for joining me on this journey. It might just be for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but I appreciate you and I hope that you found this episode to be helpful. If you want to book a one-on-one coaching call with me, I am super busy nowadays. So like when I got started, I was loving replying to everyone with the emails and like all the comments on social media and Twitter, and actually did Periscope way back in the day when that was like a live streaming platform. And now it's just gotten to the point where like I literally don't have more hours in the day. So I try to every once I can like reply to my YouTube comments and that stuff, but there's just not enough hours in the day. So if you want to really get a hold of me and to lock me down for a solid hour where we can go in depth into an intensive coaching call for your campaign, laying out the entire strategy, everything you need to know, give you the insider tips, as well as kind of the candid, not so well discussed inside baseball talk when it comes to this agency, the agencies in this industry, the tools out there, the people out there that can help you or not help you, right? I'll share all of that with you on a coaching call, super candid, very honest, straightforward. If you're interested in booking that coaching call, you can go to crowdcrux.com/coaching. That is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching. Just go to that link, book a one-on-one coaching call with me. And it'll go in my calendar and we can get that squared away ASAP. Usually like to do my calls on Fridays. And also, recently it's actually been really backlogged. So if you don't see your time, you can always email me. You'll get my email once you go through the process. I will try to accommodate you to the best that I can. So just try to be a little bit patient and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Give me a rating and review on iTunes and I will see you next time.